Look at the device in your hand or the screen in front of you. Most of us use technology every single hour. We use it to talk, to work, and to dream. But this world did not happen by accident. It was built by people with big ideas. One man, more than any other, changed how we touch the digital world. This is the story of Steve Jobs. His story begins in 1955 in San Francisco. A young woman gave birth to a baby boy, but she could not keep him. She wanted him to go to a family with a college education. However, the couple who wanted him, Paul and Clara Jobs, had never finished school. They promised the birth mother one thing: they would send the boy to university one day. Paul and Clara adopted the baby and named him Steve. They lived in a place that would later become famous as Silicon Valley. In the 1960s, this area was filled with engineers and inventors. These men spent their weekends in their garages building radios and engines. Steve grew up watching his father work with his hands. He learned that things are made by people. Steve was a very smart child, but he was often bored at school. He did not like sitting at a desk and listening to teachers. He preferred to ask questions and explore. He once said that his father taught him the most important lesson of design. Even the back of a fence, which no one sees, should be built perfectly. Excellence matters everywhere. When Steve was in high school, he met another student named Steve Wozniak. People called him Woz. Woz was a genius with electronics. He could build things that other people thought were impossible. Jobs and Wozniak became fast friends. They shared a love for technology and a desire to challenge the way things worked. Together, they were a perfect team. Before we continue this journey, I would love to know where you are joining us from today. Please share your location in the comments. And if you find these stories of great leaders interesting, feel free to subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us tell more stories about the people who shaped our modern world. Now, let us return to the story. The two friends started their first business while they were still very young. They created something called a blue box. It was a small device that allowed people to make long-distance phone calls for free. It was not exactly legal, but it taught them a vital lesson. They realized that two young people could build a tool that could control a massive, multi-billion-dollar system. This feeling of power changed Steve. He realized that the world was not a fixed place. It could be pushed, changed, and improved. After high school, he went to Reed College, but he dropped out after only 6 months. He didn't want to spend his parents' money on classes that didn't interest him. However, he stayed on campus to attend the classes he loved. One of those classes was calligraphy, the art of beautiful writing. At the time, it seemed useless for a career in technology. He learned about different fonts and the space between letters. He learned what makes great art. 10 years later, this knowledge would change the world of computers. It was the reason the first Macintosh had beautiful fonts and elegant design. Steve spent some time traveling in India, seeking spiritual answers. He returned to California with a shaved head and a new perspective. He was looking for something more than a normal job. Meanwhile, Wozniak was building something incredible. He was creating a small computer that used a keyboard and a screen. At that time, computers were huge machines kept in locked rooms. Wozniak just wanted to show his invention to other engineers. But Steve saw something much bigger. He saw a future where every person had a computer on their desk. He convinced Wozniak that they should start a company together. They needed a name. Steve had recently visited an apple farm and thought the name sounded fun, spirited, and not intimidating. They called it Apple. The beginning was very humble. They did not have an office or any money. To get the cash they needed, Steve sold his Volkswagen bus and Wozniak sold his expensive scientific calculator. They set up their workspace in the garage of Steve's parents. It was hot, crowded, and messy, but they were happy. They were building the future with their own two hands. In 1976, they finished the Apple I. It was just a circuit board, but it was a start. They sold about 200 of them. However, Steve was already thinking about the Apple II. He wanted it to be a finished product. He wanted it to look like a kitchen appliance, not a machine for hobbyists. He wanted it to be beautiful, simple, and ready to use. The Apple II was a massive success. It was the first computer that many regular people ever bought. Suddenly, Apple grew from a garage project into a real company. Steve was only 21 years old. He was young, rich, and famous. But he was also very difficult to work with. He demanded perfection from everyone, and he was often very blunt with his words. By the time Steve was 25, he was worth over $100 million. Most people would have stopped there and enjoyed the money. But Steve was not driven by wealth. He was driven by the desire to create something perfect. He wanted to build a computer that was as easy to use as a toaster. He wanted technology to be for the artists and the dreamers. In the early 80s, Steve visited a research center called Xerox PARC. There, he saw something that changed everything. He saw a computer that used a mouse to point at icons on a screen. Before this, people had to type complex codes to talk to computers. Steve realized that this was the future. He rushed back to Apple to start a new project, the Macintosh. The Macintosh became Steve's obsession. He put together a small team of brilliant engineers and designers. He told them they were pirates, and it was better to be a pirate than to join the Navy. They worked day and night. Steve cared about every detail. He even made the engineers sign their names on the inside of the computer case. They were artists, and artists signed their work. In 1984, the Macintosh was ready. Steve introduced it with a famous television commercial during the Super Bowl. The commercial showed a world of gray, boring people being freed by a woman with a hammer. It was a message to the world. Apple was here to break the rules. The Macintosh was friendly. It said, "Hello," when you turned it on. However, there was a problem. The Macintosh was beautiful, but it was slow and expensive. Sales began to drop after a few months. Inside Apple, tensions were rising. Steve was fighting with the board of directors. He had hired a man named John Scully from Pepsi to be the CEO. Steve asked him, "Do you want to sell sugar water for the rest of your life?" Initially, Steve and John Scully were friends, but as the company struggled, their relationship broke. Steve was seen as too young and too temperamental to lead. The board of directors had to make a choice. They had to choose between the founder and the experienced businessman. In 1985, they chose the businessman. Steve Jobs was fired from the company he created. It was a public and painful defeat. Steve was 30 years old and his life's work was gone. He felt like a failure. For a few months, he didn't know what to do. He even thought about running away from Silicon Valley. But then, something started to change. He realized that he still loved what he did. Being fired had freed him from the pressure of success. Steve decided to start again. He founded a new company called NeXT. He wanted to build the most powerful computer for universities and researchers. The NeXT computer was a black cube, and it was a masterpiece of design. It was way ahead of its time. However, it was also very expensive, and the company struggled to sell enough units to survive. While NeXT was struggling, Steve made another investment. He bought a small group of computer animators from George Lucas. He called the new company Pixar. At first, Pixar sold hardware, but Steve saw the potential for something else. He saw the potential for the first ever movie made entirely with computers. He spent millions of his own money to keep the company alive. It was a huge gamble. For years, Pixar did not make a profit, but Steve believed in the artists. Finally, in 1995, Pixar released Toy Story. It was a global sensation. It changed the movie industry forever. Steve became a billionaire again when Pixar went public. More importantly, he learned how to manage creative people without stifling their genius. He was growing up. During these years away from Apple, Steve also found peace in his personal life. He met Laureen Powell, and they got married. They started a family and lived a relatively simple life in Palo Alto. This stability gave him the strength he would need for his next act. He didn't know it yet, but his old company, Apple, was dying. By 1996, Apple was in serious trouble. They were losing billions of dollars. Their products were boring and confusing. They were only 90 days away from going completely bankrupt. They needed a new operating system, and they looked at Steve's company, NeXT. In a surprising move, Apple decided to buy NeXT for over $400 million. Steve Jobs was back. He returned to Apple as an advisor, but everyone knew he was the only one who could save it. Within months, the board of directors asked him to be the interim CEO. Steve accepted, but he didn't do it for the money. He took a salary of only $1 a year. He did it because he loved Apple. His first task was to clean up the mess. Apple was making dozens of different products, and most of them were terrible. Steve sat the managers in a room and drew a simple grid on a whiteboard. He said they would only make 4 products, 2 for pros and 2 for regular users. He canceled 70% of Apple's projects. It was a brutal but necessary move. To fix the brand, he launched the Think Different campaign. It didn't show computers. It showed photos of heroes like Albert Einstein, Martin Luther King, and Mahatma Gandhi. The message was clear. Apple was for the people who think they can change the world. Steve wanted to remind the employees and the customers what the company stood for. It was about passion. In 1998, Steve introduced the iMac. It was unlike any computer ever seen. It was made of translucent Bondi blue plastic. You could see the electronics inside. It had no floppy disk drive, which made people angry at first, but Steve knew the future was the internet. The iMac became the fastest-selling computer in Apple's history. The company was finally making money again. Steve also found a creative partner in a young designer named Joni Ive. They shared the same vision. Things should be as simple as possible. Together, they began to reimagine what technology could look like. They didn't just want to make tools, they wanted to make objects of desire. They spent hours discussing the curve of a corner or the feel of a button. By the year 2000, Steve was officially the CEO again. He had saved Apple from the edge of death. But he wasn't finished. He realized that the computer was becoming a hub for digital life. People were starting to use digital cameras and music players. Steve wanted Apple to be at the center of this new world. He looked at the music industry and saw an opportunity. At that time, most portable music players were terrible. They were big, slow, and held very few songs. Steve told his team to build something better. In 2001, he introduced the iPod. He described it simply, 1,000 songs in your pocket. It was tiny, white, and beautiful. Most importantly, the scroll wheel made it incredibly easy to use. The iPod was a massive hit, but there was still a problem. How do people get music onto it? Most people were downloading music illegally. Steve convinced the major record labels to sell songs for 99 cents on the iTunes store. It was a win for everyone. People got their music easily, artists got paid, and Apple became the biggest music retailer in the world. Apple was no longer just a computer company. It was a digital powerhouse. But Steve noticed a threat. He saw that mobile phones were starting to include cameras and music players. If a phone could do everything an iPod could do, people would stop buying iPods. Instead of waiting for someone else to build a killer phone, Steve decided Apple would build it themselves. The development of the iPhone was a top-secret project. The engineers worked in a locked building with no windows. They went through hundreds of prototypes. Steve insisted that the phone should not have a plastic keyboard. It should be just one big piece of glass. People said it was impossible to type on glass, but Steve wouldn't listen. He wanted the design to be pure. In January 2007, Steve walked onto a stage in San Francisco. He told the audience he was introducing 3 new products: a widescreen iPod with touch controls, a revolutionary mobile phone, and a breakthrough internet communicator. Then he revealed the truth. They were not 3 separate devices. They were one device. He called it the iPhone. The crowd went wild. The iPhone changed everything. It changed how we work, how we play, and how we connect. It put the power of a computer into everyone's pocket. It was the ultimate expression of Steve's vision. Technology was finally invisible. It was just you and your content. But behind the scenes of this massive success, Steve was facing a very personal and dangerous battle. In 2003, Steve had been diagnosed with a rare form of pancreatic cancer. He initially tried to treat it with special diets and alternative medicine. Eventually, he had surgery, but the illness would follow him for the rest of his life. He became thinner and more fragile, but his mind remained as sharp as ever. He knew his time might be limited. This awareness of death changed how he worked. He became even more focused. He didn't want to waste a single day on things that didn't matter. In 2005, he gave a famous speech to the graduates at Stanford University. He told them, "Your time is limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life." He spoke about how death is the best invention of life. Even as he grew weaker, Steve continued to push Apple forward. In 2010, he introduced the iPad. Many people laughed at the idea. They called it a giant iPhone. But Steve understood something they didn't. He knew that for many people, the traditional computer was too complicated. The iPad was a window to the internet that anyone, from a child to a grandfather, could use. The iPad was another huge success. Steve had now revolutionized the computer, the movie industry, the music industry, and the telephone industry. He had built the most valuable company in the world. But more than that, he had created a culture of excellence. He had taught a new generation of designers and engineers that good enough is never actually enough. In August 2011, Steve knew he could no longer perform his duties. He wrote a letter to the Apple community and stepped down as CEO. He passed the torch to Tim Cook. Steve spent his final weeks at home with his family. He looked back on his life not with regret, but with a sense of completion. He had finished his work. On October 5, 2011, Steve Jobs passed away at the age of 56. The world went into a period of mourning. People left flowers and half-eaten apples outside of Apple stores across the globe. They felt like they had lost a friend, even if they had never met him. They felt connected to him through the devices they used every day. Steve Jobs was not a perfect man. He could be mean, impatient, and demanding. But he was a man who cared deeply about the human experience. He believed that technology should be a tool for the heart, not just the head. He wanted to put a dent in the universe, and there is no doubt that he succeeded in doing exactly that. He often spoke about the intersection of technology and the liberal arts. He believed that the best products come from people who love poetry, music, and history as much as they love code. This was his secret. He didn't just build computers, he built experiences. He made us feel something when we touched his creations. He made technology feel human. His life was a series of dots that only made sense when looking backward. The calligraphy class, the trip to India, the failure at Apple, the success at Pixar. All of these moments combined to create the man he became. He taught us that even the worst failures can be the beginning of something wonderful if we have the courage to keep going. Steve's legacy is all around us. It is in the way we swipe our screens and the way we expect things to be beautiful. He raised the bar for everyone. He showed us that one person with a clear vision can change the way billions of people live. He proved that the dreamers, the rebels, and the misfits are the ones who truly move the world. Think back to that garage in California in 1976. Two young men had no idea what they were about to start. They only knew they wanted to build something cool. That spark of curiosity grew into a flame that lit up the entire world. It reminds us that every great thing starts with a simple choice to try. As we look to the future, we can still hear his voice. He reminds us to stay hungry and to stay foolish. He reminds us to follow our hearts, even when they lead us off the well-worn path. The story of Steve Jobs is not just a story about technology. It is a story about the power of the human spirit to create, to fail, and to rise again. The story continues within the walls of Apple today. The team he built still follows his principles. They still look for the simplest solution. They still care about the things you cannot see. Steve's presence is felt in every new design and every new idea. He created a foundation that will last for decades. His work was his gift to the world. Consider the impact of his life on your own. How has technology changed your relationships or your work? We often take these things for granted. But someone had to dream them up. Someone had to fight for the idea that a computer should be elegant. Steve Jobs fought that battle for us, and he won. The lessons of his life are universal. You don't have to be a computer scientist to learn from him. You only need to care about what you do. Whether you are a teacher, a gardener, or a parent, you can strive for excellence. You can pay attention to the details. You can choose to think differently. Steve once said that the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do. It is a call to action for all of us. Don't be afraid of your big ideas. Don't be afraid to be the only person in the room who sees things differently. Your unique perspective is your greatest strength. The journey was never easy for him. He faced public humiliation and personal illness. He was often lonely in his vision. But he never gave up. He had a deep inner fire that kept him moving forward. That fire came from a belief that life is short and we should do something great while we are here. In our modern world, we are surrounded by noise. There are so many voices telling us what to do and how to think. Steve's story encourages us to listen to our own inner voice. He believed that our intuition already knows what we truly want to become. Everything else is secondary. That is a powerful lesson for any adult. His obsession with simplicity is more relevant today than ever. In a world that is becoming more complex and stressful, we crave things that are easy to understand. Steve understood that simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. It takes a lot of hard work to make something look easy. That effort is what defines true quality. We should also remember his love for the arts. He showed us that science and art are not enemies. They are two sides of the same coin. When we combine them, we get something magical. This balance is what made Apple different from every other company. It was the soul in the machine. Steve Jobs didn't want to leave a company. He wanted to leave a legacy. A company is just a way to make money, but a legacy is a way to change history. He succeeded. Every time we use a touchscreen or download an app, we are participating in the world he imagined. He transformed our reality. Looking back at the entire journey, we see a man who never stopped learning. He was a different person at 50 than he was at 20. He learned from his mistakes. He learned to listen to others. He learned that family and health are more important than any product. He became a more complete human being through his struggles. The digital revolution is still happening. New technologies like artificial intelligence are changing the world again. We can ask ourselves, what would Steve do? He would probably look for a way to make it more personal. He would look for a way to make it more beautiful. He would try to make it serve humanity, not the other way around. His life teaches us about resilience. Being fired from his own company could have been the end of his story. Instead, he used it as a chance to grow. He didn't let the opinions of others define him. He knew who he was, and he knew what he wanted to achieve. That kind of focus is rare and beautiful. We often talk about the Apple magic, but the magic wasn't in the hardware or the software. The magic was in the mindset. It was the refusal to accept that things have to be the way they have always been. It was the courage to ask, what if? This mindset is available to all of us. Think about the music you listen to or the movies you watch. Steve played a part in making those experiences better. He helped create the tools that artists use to express themselves. He was a bridge between the world of engineering and the world of creativity. He understood that both are necessary for a rich life. The story of the garage is a powerful symbol. It shows that you don't need a big office or a lot of money to start something important. You only need a friend, a vision, and the willingness to work hard. The most important things in the world often start in small, quiet places. Steve also taught us about the power of focus. He was famous for saying no to good ideas so that he could say yes to the great ones. In our busy lives, we often try to do too much. We spread ourselves too thin. Steve's life reminds us to pick a few things and do them perfectly. The 2007 iPhone launch remains one of the most important moments in business history. It wasn't just about a new product, it was a masterclass in storytelling. Steve knew how to build excitement and how to explain complex things in simple ways. He was a teacher of the highest order, showing us the future before we could see it. His story is also a reminder that we are all temporary. Even the most successful man in the world cannot escape death. This realization didn't make him sad, it made him brave. It gave him the permission to follow his heart. We should all try to live with that same kind of honesty and courage. Even the smallest details of your phone were debated and perfected by him. The shape of the icons, the sound of the lock screen, the weight of the device. He cared about you, the user. He wanted you to have a great experience. That kind of empathy for the customer is what made his work so special. As we come toward the end of this story, think about the legacy you want to leave. It doesn't have to be a multi-billion-dollar company. It can be the way you treat people, the things you create, or the values you pass on. We all have the power to leave a dent in our own part of the universe. Steve Jobs once said that he would trade all of his technology for an afternoon with Socrates. He valued wisdom above everything else. He knew that technology is just a tool, but human wisdom is what gives life meaning. He was a seeker of truth until the very end of his days. His final words were reportedly, "Oh wow, oh wow, oh wow." Even in his last moments, he seemed to be seeing something wonderful. He faced the mystery of death with the same curiosity he used to face the mystery of technology. He was a traveler who had reached the end of one journey and was starting another. The world is a different place because he was here. We are more connected, more informed, and more creative. He gave us the tools to tell our own stories and to share our own lives. He democratized power. He took the power from the giant corporations and gave it to the individual. When we look at the Apple logo, we see more than just a piece of fruit. We see a symbol of rebellion, innovation, and quality. We see the work of a man who refused to be ordinary. He was a bright light that burned out too soon, but the warmth of that light still reaches us today. The story of Steve Jobs is a reminder that our lives are a work of art. We are the ones holding the brush. We can choose the colors and the shapes. We can choose to make something beautiful. It is not about the money we make, but about the impact we have on the people around us. He believed that life can be much broader once you discover one simple fact. And that is, everything around you that you call life was made up by people that were no smarter than you. You can change it. You can influence it. You can build your own things that other people can use. This realization is the key to freedom. It removes the fear of failure. If everything is made up, then you have the right to make up your own way of living. Steve lived his life with this freedom. He didn't follow the rules, he made his own. And in doing so, he made the world better. So, as you go about your day, remember the boy from the garage. Remember the man who was fired and came back to save the world. Remember the visionary who saw beauty in a circuit board. His story is a testament to what is possible when we believe in ourselves and our ideas. Thank you for walking through this journey with us. Steve Jobs was a complicated man, but his goal was simple: to make something great. We hope his story has inspired you to look at your own life and your own work with fresh eyes. The future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams. Stay hungry, stay foolish, and most importantly, keep moving forward. The world is waiting for your unique contribution. Every great story begins with a single step, just like the one Steve took in his parents' garage many years ago. It is time for you to start your own story. Farewell for now.